my iPad. Let me know when I can go. Oh look, there's something on the little screen. Hi! Hi internet! Isn't the internet amazing? We're good? Can we get going? Yes. Yay! We can get going! Good morning everybody! That was really good. You're already ready and raring to go. Welcome to our BIMA event on mental health, where we're taking a deeper look at the findings we shared at the report launch we did back in April. Who came to the report launch? Did anyone here come to that? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, you well. Okay, well, all of you didn't come, you missed that, it was amazing. But hopefully there are some copies. Let me just grab this. There are some copies of the report here, only 4. So if you want one, you need to hurry up, or they're online. It's already, you wait, you're... Yeah, there we go. Thank you very much. Lynn, there we go. I'm going to get another one out. Oh, look, someone else is grabbing one. It looks getting in fast. So the voices of the industry, the BIMA Tech Inclusion and Diversity report. So we basically wanted to get a sense of how the nation felt. So there's loads of consensus information, various things like this, but what does it actually mean? And various things that came out that were interesting, but one of the things that probably was most shocking was the results on mental health. So I'm going to take you through that, and then we've got a panel of experts where we're going to dig into what can we actually do to drive change. Welcome to the BIMA event as well. How many people here know if they're members of BIMA or not? Oh, that's pretty good, that's about 60%. Okay, so just for those people who don't know anything about BIMA, BIMA is the representative body for the British digital industry. So by digital we mean technology and digital. And we provide various things, but we're connectors, thought leaders, champions and change makers. So today we're kind of connecting you because you're going to hopefully meet loads of new friends who are all passionate about mental health. Thought leadership through the report. Champions, we're starting to pull together a cross-business steering committee to work out actionable changes we can make to try and improve mental health within the industry, and therefore change makers. The membership comprises lots of different people. Agencies make up a large part of it. Organisations and brands, non-governmental organisations. How many people here work in an agency? Let's have a look at this. How many people work for a brand? How many people work for a tech platform, media-y type business? Yeah, so you get around. What do you two work at? I was like, both. No. Both. No. Don't want to say the name of the company. I don't know. Oh, Memrise. Memrise. Okay, interesting. And what enables us is we have a set of groups which sit behind everything called councils. And the councils are UK-wide, so we have councils across the country. We have things called think tanks, which are more looking at stuff like blockchain and AI, so they're kind of more geeky, is the phrase I'm going to use to describe the think tanks. Craft councils, talent and diversity, which this sits under, and industry as well. And if anyone wants to be part of the Diversity Council, we're just about to open up a call for membership to broaden the membership out as well. One last thing before I get into the actual report. It's the BIMA Awards, which are the most prestigious and long-running digital awards in the country, though I say so myself. Here's Michael from Dare, looking very proud at the award that he won. We're open for entries at the moment. They close next week. And we have a BIMA Advance Award, Diversity Talent Initiative of the Year, and that is for organised groups and things that you're doing within your organisation. So you might have a women's group or a mental health group. It's for campaigns that you're doing that are furthering diversity, or it could be that you are an organisation in and of itself that's furthering diversity. And we would encourage you to enter. Who won last year again? I've just had a total. You don't know either, do you? So, Tech Mums. So Dr. Black's Tech Mums won last year, which was a brilliant entry. So please do enter. And we know that some groups maybe don't have budgets or are NFPs, so there is a much lower prize for entering if you do. So I'm just going to very quickly share some of the headlines that came out of the report, just in case you didn't see them. The reason why we did the report in the first place was this. I set up the Diversity Council for BIMA, and I sort of went, right, what should we do? And then I went, I don't know. Well, what's the problem? I don't know. I don't know what the problem is. How can I solve something if I don't know what the problem is? So the whole reason we did the report was to try and work out what the problem was. there were a lot of problems, so now we've got a lot of work to do. We've got to solve all those problems. We're a bit like, damn it, we should have just pretended we knew anyway. Anyway, so the key question was, how can we drive strategies to change if we don't know what needs to change, nor why and how? So, what did we find out? How are we feeling? First of all, let's look at stress. So from a stress perspective, 66% of respondents are stressed by their work, and 13% feel constantly stressed, and over half are sometimes constant experiencing symptoms. This really shocked us. It means that as an industry, we're more stressed than employees of the NHS, which is the kind of headline we went to print with. And I think one of the things we talked about at the launch report, and you'll see this all the way through, is I think sometimes within the digital and technology sector, we sit around going, we're so cool, like look at this office, and it's like got an outside space, and we have like a pool table, and on Friday we get to have beer for free, and hang on, there's quite a place over there. We think that that makes up for supportive, nurturing environments, good working hours, all these things, and so we don't accept or really realise how harmful stress is. How many people here feel stressed half the time at work? How many people here feel stressed a third of the time at work? How many people here never feel stressed at work? And I think we grow up thinking that stress is healthy. Like, we should feel stressed because that means we're busy and like we're really important because we're so stressed. But actually all stress is doing is making us less productive, less able at our work, and it's really, really damaging. The thing that came through as well, which is really upsetting, was who is more likely to experience stress. So those with the long-term health impairments, so people who are already struggling, are therefore more likely to feel stressed. Now you might say, of course they are, because they're not very well. Well, surely it's the responsibility of the employer, so that somebody who may have a long-term health impairment is being supported more, so their stress is being lessened. Because the two shouldn't be linked. Recent sufferers of anxiety and depression, bisexuals and those preferring to self-describe their sexuality, neurodivergence. And neurodivergence, just so you know, 25% of respondents identified as being neurodivergent. Hands up who knows what neurodivergence means. I'll just give you a definition. Neurodivergence is a collective term for an individual who is on the autism spectrum, who is ADHD, who is dyslexic, dyspraxic, dyscalculia, or has Tourette's syndrome. So it's all the people whose brains are wired brilliantly differently, but again, we know that there's a huge occurrence of people who are neurodivergent in the digital and tech industry, 25%, 33% of which are likely to have ADHD, and yet those people, again, are clearly not being supported in the workplace. So they're choosing tech as an industry where they want to thrive, but they're not being supported. Returning parents, that's quite depressing, particularly those returning within the last 12 months, 71%. Younger people, maybe because in the tech and digital sector, younger people are given a lot of responsibility quite early on, and maybe again, training and support isn't there, and women at 58%. So quite bleak. When we read that, we were like, that's quite bleak. And just a little quote from Bruce, who wrote the book, The Joy of Work, which is all about how to demystify all things like long hours. Thanks, Elon Musk, for saying that you work 120 hours a week, and that that's why you're successful. That's a great role model to the younger generation. Right? Stress kills creativity. The most successful organisations create stimulating, energising environments, and why do so many businesses seem to want to suck the creativity right out of us? Individually and collectively, we need to understand that hours worked, emails sent, and always on deliver lots of added stress, but virtually no productivity bonus. So it's about flipping this belief that if you work more, you're going to be better. But in actuality, when you go over certain hours of work, your productivity and your creativity just nosedives. We then looked at anxiety, depression, and mental health. Over half, 52%, so they sometimes or constantly experience symptoms, including headaches, anxiety attacks, sleeplessness, indigestion, continual tiredness or similar. Over 1/3 report symptoms over the last 2 years. And again, we see marginalised groups experiencing this to a much higher percentage, which again is so upsetting because we're trying to create this diverse and inclusive industry, and yet people who are diverse are suffering the most from anxiety and depression. So incidence appear much higher in the neurodivergent, 84%, compared to neurotypical, and more likely to affect women than men. And those that have been diagnosed with a mental health condition was 28%. and 43% of people felt that this had negatively impacted on their career. So for those people who had a formal diagnosis and had maybe been open about it, they felt it had impacted on their career. So again, let's turn a mirror on ourselves and say, what's going on here? People who are really suffering, when they share, or when it becomes apparent how they're feeling, they're suffering even more. 45% felt there's not enough awareness and support for mental health within their company. Well, do you feel a bit sad? I feel a bit sad. Do you feel really happy at these figures? No. You don't feel happy at these figures. And Michelle, who's on our panel in a minute, we put in a quote from you, Michelle, who's a mental health first aid instructor. We're going to talk, I imagine, a little bit about mental health first aid on this panel.
I might mention it.
You might mention it. Talking about how there are now many tools that businesses have in their armoury in order to help and alleviate mental health at work. And we're going to go into mental health first aid in a minute. But I love this bit here. Through the training, we're seeing more people being empowered to talk about and deal with mental illness, and more people willing to raise the topic with managers and HR teams. So it's all about, obviously, normalising mental health. And this is a quote from Lucy, who founded The Future is MD, which is a kind of community group for neurodivergent, that if we want to embrace this wonderful workforce to thrive and not just survive, we've got to start understanding the differences and how we can support people. So, I just wanted to give you the background and the stats of why we decided to do this morning. So when we saw this, we thought, okay, this is not great. We now need to work out what we can do differently. So we wanted to put together a panel of very clever people to just examine these figures a little bit more, and also for them to share what they're doing in their workplaces and in their personal time and in their sort of passions and careers, in order to come up with strategies and solutions for change so that we can share them with you today, and hopefully you can take some of them forward. I'm also really excited that after the panel we have Yulia, who I think I just saw arrive, who is going to be doing a guided meditation, because we thought actually it's really important that we have this conversation, which will probably fill our brains with anxiety and maybe depression, and let's just take a moment to be really reflective and thoughtful before we all go back to work. Okay, so we're going to do that at the end of the session, and I'm so excited about it. Will Yulia tell us a little bit? Yulia, will you tell us a little bit about Remind Studio as well before you go to the guided meditation? Good, that would be great. Okay, so I'd now like to welcome our wonderful panel up. Can we give them a large round of applause? No, that's not too annoying, is it, where your faces are? Who am I missing? Oh, these two.
Sorry, we were just topping up on water.
Oh, good idea, good plan. So...
Can I sit next to you then?
Yeah, you can sit next to me.
Great.
You can just get up the questions. So I'm not going to do a long intro because you are much better introing yourself. I have to say I'm over the moon to have this panel. Two people on the panel have spoken to me before around mental health, and I've actually done some work with one of them. I know Michelle done some work with you. And one person I've never had on a panel before, I'm very excited about this. Thank you for being our token man. If anyone knows any men who like talking openly about mental health, then put me in touch, because they're slightly few and far between. Ellen says she knows loads.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because they're young.
No.
Oh, they're old as well.
I'll talk about the collective in a bit, but there's loads of men in that.
Okay, brilliant.
I'm the youngest. I'm probably the youngest in this room.
Yeah. And Ellen, who again I've done loads of work with, and I worked in New York, so I want her to talk about what her specialism, what she focuses on. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves, and actually, should we start the opposite end and work back this way? Michelle, are you okay just to say who you are, what you do, and maybe explain your outfit?
I am wearing pyjamas. It's not just an eccentric suit. Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm Michelle Morgan. I'm the founder of a youth-led agency called Livity that was founded in 2001 as a bit of an experiment. Can you have a socially responsible youth marketing agency? We gave ourselves 6 months to see if that was possible, and Livity celebrated its 18th birthday a couple of weeks ago, so the experiment's working so far. But at the end of 2016, I had a massive burnout moment. Burnout, breakdown, followed by a period of extremely frightening depression and anxiety. and I had to step out of the business for a while to create space and get better and deal with all the different things that were going on. And in creating that space, I kind of realised that there was a comment that was kind of going around and around in my head just as I'd taken time out of the business, and that had been, it's a bit awkward when you talk about your mental health to the business, which had been crushing and silencing, and I stopped talking about my mental health for some time. But all the way on the other side of it, which is a much longer story for, I'm sure, what you want me to do right now, Nads.
Yeah, keep it reasonably brief.
Okay. You know what? I've had hundreds of conversations about mental health now, and what I have discovered is it's about awkward for about 3 to 7 seconds in my head when either I'm going to tell Nads about my mental health or I'm going to ask you how yours is.
It's okay today, actually. It wasn't so great last week, but today it's okay.
Cool. That's really good. Mine's not brilliant today.
Oh no, you need lots of parts. We're going to give you
I'll talk about that when we get going. In all of that time, with all of that going on, I did spend a lot of time in my pyjamas, and I was thinking about my what next, and I was giving myself this gentle permission to play with the idea, if I did it all over again, what would I do? And I guess that one day I got to the crossroads where brilliance meets madness, where all great ideas come from, and the pyjamas that kind of represented everything holding me back became my inspiration. And I wondered if other people like me saw the duality of the PJ day. The good PJ days when we joyfully stay in our jammies all day and we rest and relax and eat good food, and we should have more of those days. But for some of us, there are those days when we can't get out of our pyjamas. And that's depression, it's anxiety, it's stress. And I just thought that the symbolism of the PJ day was interesting, and so the new experiment in my life is, can I make the most kind and caring pyjamas that are almost the Trojan horse to deliver messages of hope and help around the topic of mental health, to raise awareness, to raise money for all the good work that's being done in the area, but ultimately we're on a mission to make mental health an everyday conversation.
Thank you, Michelle. Can we give Michelle a round of applause, please? Introduce yourself and tell.
Absolutely. So, hello everyone. It's great to be here representing men. Yay.
All men. This is your job now.
No, I don't represent all men. No way. Too much responsibility. I run a company called Analect. We're part of Omnicom. We look after data, tech, and analytics in the advertising space. But that's not why I'm here today. I'm here today because I experienced burnout a couple of years ago, had some time off work, suffered with depression and anxiety, and that experience kind of made me want to talk about it a lot more. When I went through that myself, I had suddenly loads of people from around the business come up to me and go, I've been through that, I know how it is, I know what it's like. I was like, where the hell were you like a month ago when I needed to talk to someone? And the problem was that just no one was talking about it. So I kind of took it upon myself to start talking a lot more about it within Omnicom. And I've been doing that kind of ever since, really. I had the great fortune of being tutored by Michelle in mental health first aid along with NADS at the beginning of this year. And I also started a kind of website blog to try and encourage other people to share their stories as well. So I guess I'm kind of on that journey, trying to speak up a lot more about it, and coming to events like this to kind of encourage people to share their stories.
Thank you so much. Round of applause. So, Ellen, let's find out if you are the youngest person in the room.
Anyone here born later than 1998?
No,
Yeah,
you won.
I
You are.
So, hi, my name is Ellen Jones. Thank you so much for having me here today. I speak from a variety of perspectives. The first is probably by day, I am a student, I'm a second year, I am someone who in not too long will be looking for jobs at places like the kind you work. And I have very high expectations of the employers that I work for, quite frankly. And sometimes I think that's potentially arrogant, but actually, why would I not want to work somewhere that values its employees' well-being? When I'm not a student, I'm an internationally awarded campaigner in LGBT rights, mental health and disability. last year I ended up winning the first ever MTV EMA for campaigning. So I've been working with Viacom. I was one of 5 in the world, and the only one from Europe. And it was a bizarre experience being flown out to Spain and being live in 180 countries. What I do now is I write and I speak, and I also go into companies and I look at their policy and how that's impacting their staff on a day-to-day basis. And yeah, I speak from a variety of perspectives. I speak as someone who, I have bipolar disorder, which is what it is. I am also autistic, and I didn't know that till I was 19. I'm only 20 now. So I had to basically do all of my adolescence not knowing I was autistic. And also most women don't get diagnosed with autism till their 30s and 40s when they have children, and then their children get diagnosed. And then they realise, because the thing with being neurodivergent and a woman is, especially autistic and a woman, is you learn to mask your symptoms, but also science and the diagnostic criteria don't know what autism looks like. So there's a lot of women who struggle and who think there's something wrong with them, and it's because they don't know that they're neurodiverse. So I talk about that a lot. And then I also, I was going to say a raging homosexual, but this isn't the room for that. I started in LGBT rights and campaigning for Stonewall and winning an award when I was like 17. But that was born out of having an experience of basically being homophobically bullied and getting death threats from the age of 14. And I know what it's like existing in a space as a queer person and trying to navigate that and the impact that has on your mental health. You know, I say to some people, I might have bipolar disorder, but the stuff that has affected me more in terms of my general mental well-being has often been like the trauma I've got associated with being queer and navigating spaces that aren't welcoming and navigating spaces where they want me to be smaller than I am. And I just would like to, and you know this about me, I freelance at the moment on the side of uni and working my job, but I don't want to freelance permanently. I really want the stability of a normal job. But I also know that I can't find that anywhere. And so it's really helpful for me to be in these rooms and to be able to see that there are companies prioritising the well-being of the staff and that are looking to make tangible actions. That means that people like me, who you really want, can actually work for you. Because it feels like walking into a brick wall sometimes.
Yeah. You're making me a bit tearful, Ellen. I think there's a couple of really interesting things you just said I wouldn't mind just dwelling on, which is, like you say, it's the trauma of what you experience when you were being bullied, homophobically bullied, that can have a damage on mental health. And I think we forget that.
And it comes up, like the things like you can get triggered by like small comments, and you don't, it's not like that right now I'm quite lucky in that I don't experience a lot of the harshness of the stuff. I mean I do, but only kind of in an activism context. But there's so many things that happen on a day-to-day basis, whether that's being like shouted at down the street or having comments made from out on a date, or I had an incident where a guy started filming me on a date, started filming us for 10 minutes and then the staff did nothing. And it's all these little things that you just, like, I shrug off and I'm like, this is normal, this is totally fine, this is, it's worse for other people, but it has a cumulative impact. And if you're turning up for work the next day having had this happen, or like I was working, I work in an art gallery and a man came up to me, and some of the artwork was LGBT, and was written, made by queer people, and he started being really homophobic to me. And you never know like when you're going to encounter that, and being at work and like then having to just go on with the rest of your shift. Yeah, some thoughts.
I think it's really, thank you, Ellen. Let's give Ellen a round. Lovely Emma, what would you like to tell us about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a brand consultant today, but I spent many years within agencies and brands, leading campaigns, running pitches, leading teams, ascending the career ladder, winning awards and admiration. But in my personal life, I was struggling, and I'd spent most of my life kind of living with a big black cloud over me. I am a survivor of childhood trauma. But that wasn't something that I came to realise until I had a breakdown in 2012. So it was a properly debilitating, mentally and physically. I had a full-on breakdown and I was out of work. It was triggered by something in my personal life. But at that moment, which was so unexpected, everything I had suppressed with work, with boozing, with boys, with everything I could, do in my life to suppress things that I probably didn't want to face, I had to face in that moment. And I entered therapy. I had
Choose
a very
therapy, Ellen's t-shirt.
yeah, I had a very
Thanks, Harley.
low moment, and a friend. I felt like I was at the end of the road really, and a friend asked me for one day, and on that one day I spoke to a therapist, and we did what I call we refer to going into the basement. So it's, you've lived your life above stairs, and you go down into this basement with a torch, and quite frankly, the basement is filled with shit, and there's shit all over the walls. You didn't have to put there, but you've got to clean it up to get well. And I had to go through the whole process. It's been 7 years now of recovery and learning and knowing that I'm a work in progress. Even within recent years, I had a PTSD diagnosis, and all the while I'm having relationships and having friendships and working and trying to learn and live throughout all of that. So last year I launched a storytelling platform called Surviving Sundays, and it became a place where I wanted to tell my story of recovery and just talk about things like loneliness. It's an epidemic, and I look for all the world on Instagram like I'm having the best time. I've been working with celebrities and brands for years, and I'm always at parties and hosting the parties and on a yacht in Cannes and doing all the fun things, and I was incredibly lonely with the secrets that I was harbouring, and the mental health that I was experiencing was very, very poor, and I was having to pretend I was okay. So this platform became a place where I started to tell my story, but it's now a place where I share the stories of anyone who can talk about anything that impacts their mental health. So we have men, women, everybody is welcome to share their story. We talk about anything from addiction, anger, child loss, grief, anything that people are dealing with. And also because, and I will always say this, I'm not a mental health professional. All I can share with you today is my lived experience. It was therefore very important for me to have a place within this platform where we would have experts who share advice. And just one thing for you to because Surviving Sunday sounds like such a weird name really, and I almost forget to explain that. Now this is true for many of you, but Sunday for me at that time was the hardest day of the week. It was the day where I felt the most alone. You're going into a week a bit fearful around 4 o'clock. Oh my God, I've got to see people tomorrow. I'm going to walk in the kitchen, they're going to ask me how my weekend was. I'm going to say it was chill, but it was fine, when actually probably I didn't leave the house. And through learning to survive Sunday with a small act of kindness to myself, that might have started off when I was in bed, very much relate to what Michelle said. Sometimes pyjamas aren't a choice. I could not get out of bed. And it was as hard as tying my laces, the mentality to just get those shoes on and get out of the door. Built up, unbelievably, that 10-minute walk around the block became a coffee on my own. I was petrified of doing things on my own and feeling like everybody could see me. And then eventually I went to New York on my own and saw a Broadway show on my own, went to dinner on my own, went to Mexico for 10 days and swam in lagoons on my own, which was, for me, therefore, Surviving Sunday is all about that journey of recovery. It is possible, but it takes time. So that's my
Round of
story.
applause for Emma. I should just say there are 4 mental health first aiders on this panel, and then we're going to have to get you into the next
Oh no,
one.
I'm doing it in a couple of weeks.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Have to do
No,
it.
just collective. Tasha Evans doing it.
So if anyone is triggered at any point or wants to discuss anything during or after the session, please do come and talk to us. So let me just go back into my email with the questions I want to ask that I sent myself. That's how it's done, people. So let's just do a quick précis. The report. Some of you are at the launch. Obviously, you've all read the report in great detail, probably about 3 or 4 hours, meticulously poring over it. And I shared the headlines just in case. Yeah. What are your immediate reactions on the report? Who would like to go first with any immediate thoughts on the report?
Yeah, I just wanted to say it's a moment to take note. There's a lot of conversations. We're just off the back of Mental Health Week, Mental Health Awareness Week, so we're all perhaps more conscious. But the fact that it's 5 times people with mental health issues, 5 times more than the national average.
Yeah.
Working within the industry, working alongside us. We often talk about the 1 in 4 that are suffering, but that means that there are 3 out of 4 people living with, working with, caring for people with mental health issues. I think that therefore means that it's our collective responsibility to be educated as much as we can be and to be more compassionate, particularly where the numbers are as high as they are in this report.
Being kind is probably, I mean, Sean, I liked what you said when you were saying you had a breakdown and it's only when you came back that people went, oh, I've been through something similar, and you were like, I was feeling a bit bad before, it would be nice if you said something then. I mean, that's very typical, isn't it?
No, it is. I think that's the biggest challenge. You know, we've kind of grown up in a society where mental health isn't talked about, and it affects so many people, not just directly but indirectly as well, through kind of friends and family. And actually it's as simple as just making sure that people talk about it a bit more openly. You know, we've got generations of people who haven't talked about it, that don't have the tools or the language to be able to have those sorts of conversations. And Michelle, you said earlier, you know, talking about mental health is kind of like that 5 to 7 seconds internally. It feels a bit awkward, but you know, that's what we've got to try and get over. It needs to not feel awkward. It needs to be, you know, part of the everyday conversation, and actually getting people like this to kind of stand up and talk about their experiences is the best way to start normalising that conversation.
And I think the age thing is probably quite interesting to reflect on. So I'd love Ella's perspective on this, but when I did mental health first aid, so I'm 44, now you can't believe it, I was born in 1998. When I did mental health first aid, I was sitting there going, I was depressed for most of my 20s. But I had whole swathes of time where I was filled with so much self-loathing that I spent kind of weeks in bed and I didn't miss work. But I just thought I was having a down day, or that I was a bit of an idiot. Like, just get on with it. There's people starving all over the world.
Keep calm and carry on.
Just get up and carry on.
In Britain, we don't have feelings, we have tea and tutting.
You have what?
In Britain, we don't have feelings, we have tea
and tutting. Tea and tutting, exactly. I didn't drink tea, so I drank a Diet Coke, just thinking I'll be fine, just drink more Diet Coke. And I'm hopeful, let's see what Ellen thinks, that the conversation is, so I had a long conversation, do you know, I don't know if you know BJ Malunga, I don't know if you've met him. Yeah, I had a long conversation with him, and he sort of sat me down and said, you've got to go down into your basement, Nads, like, you've got to do it. I was like, I don't want to go down into the basement. It's full of shit. It's full of shit. But his attitude towards it, he's 23, was like, it's just like, it's not even a choice. It's just what you do and you keep doing it. So, and then do you think there is a bit more openness to it when you look at your friends and colleagues, forgetting your parents' generation, but your peer group?
Oh yeah, like we talk about mental health all the time, and we have a vocabulary for it that I don't think the older generation has. And this is where, in terms of employment, I see a real point of contrition, because we're coming from often universities where we're very actively encouraged to talk about our mental well-being, and we have a vocabulary for it, and actually if you're talking about your mental health, that seems a positive thing, whether it's whether your mental well-being is good or bad. The fact that you are discussing it and talking about it is positive. You go into a workplace, it is not permissible in a lot of spaces, and especially in more traditional industries.
So that causes
contrition. And then what do you do if you come from a space where, even if you've not been getting the support you want, you could at least talk about the issues that you're dealing with, even in a casual manner. I have friends who we say how we are on a scale of 1 to 10. Like, there's ways of checking in. Then entering an environment where that doesn't exist is really challenging. And how do you navigate that? And especially when you're like, well, I've got to enter the big scary world of work, that brings with its own challenges anyway. So I think that's a real issue that workplaces, and like, it shouldn't be that we should be talking about mental health less, it's that the workplaces need to be talking about mental health. And we sometimes get made to feel bad for talking about mental health, because we're like, well, maybe we've been wrong. The other thing I want to say about the report was that this is one of the first times I've ever seen such an in-depth analysis of what it's like being neurodivergent, which sounds really odd. And also, I mean, it's no surprise that the tech industry has a lot of neurodivergent people.
That's really noisy.
Yeah. But the thing that surprised me is that I've never seen data on it, because no one most people don't know what neurodivergent even is. And the thing I was going to say about that is, like, that's so true to the extent that, you know, when you apply for jobs and you have those diversity forms that you can tick off, like who you are, and like if you can't tick neurodivergent, it's never on the list. It doesn't exist as a disability. You've got like physical disability, learning disability, mental health condition. Neurodivergency doesn't exist. And it's like, well, that's at the application stage. God knows what it's going to be like when I actually get to interview or get to the job, if you're not even able to put down. And like, it's such a, cumulatively, it's such a large part of the population. You know, disabled people are the biggest minority. Get your act together.
Yeah. I think let's go on to the stats around that, because one of the things on poor mental health is that it was so much higher if you're neurodivergent. I'd love to just dwell on that a minute, so I'll just stay with you for a minute and then we'll go on to a few other topics. But why do you think mental health is, I mean, I actually know the answer to this question, but I want Ellen to answer it because she'll be far more clear than me. Why do you think the incidence of mental health is so much higher with the neurodivergent?
I think there's a couple of issues at play here. I think partially it's that the environment that we're working in is often inaccessible. There's various barriers that are just built into the system, whether that be the working week or whether that be the way that office culture is. Like that, for me, going into a job, I know I'm really good at the work, I just can't handle the office culture and the new people and the you know, communicating with clients that I don't know, or there's lots of different things that I struggle with. For example, I can't read tone of voice properly, I struggle with eye contact. Even in an interview, that's problematic. So that's one of the aspects. So you're basically being forced into a mould that you're never going to fit in because your brain is literally wired differently. The other aspect is the lack of support generally for neurodiverse people. So whether that be having a line manager who knows their stuff, like, and has some awareness. They don't have to be experts, but even just an awareness of what you're going through, or might be able to point you to further resources. Most line managers aren't educated in that kind of thing. Or whether that's trying to access like therapy, trying to find a therapist who knows about autism and the way that impacts like mental health conditions is so challenging. And like, I've been really lucky that I got therapy in the NHS with someone who knows their stuff, but it took me 2 years to find someone. And I'm gonna not have therapy after that. But if I could, you know, you just want to be able to access care and support, and it's a combination of having more challenges and less support. So no wonder that we struggle more, and it's frustrating because it feels like we want to, like, I want to be able to be my best self at work, and I'm not going to be able to do it because the structures are inaccessible. I'm not wrong, I'm brilliant. Like,
That's the confidence of you, but I also have that confidence. I too am brilliant. Not really.
It's not confidence, it's true.
It's belief. What I was going to say, I think is so interesting what you just said, because I'm doing a huge piece of research at the moment into neurodivergence and the workplace, and when you look at all the barriers that are there, you look at it from disability.
They're not always
broadly.
big, but they're just always there.
Yeah, it's like open plan offices, total disaster, all the noise, new environments, smell as well can be a real trigger. So I think one of the things I would ask everyone to do here is to get a handle on who are happy to declare that they're neurodivergent, and to have a policy and expertise within HR or within your people teams to understand it, because I can guarantee that at the very least 20% of your staff are neurodivergent in your businesses. And it's probably higher, because even that 25% from the report are people who know they're neurodivergent. And as we know, the older you are, the less likely you are to have got a diagnosis when you're young. So there's so many people that are probably in the workplace who could be on the autistic spectrum, or could be ADHD, or could be dyslexic, but just don't actually know that they are. So I think that's really important. I just want to touch now, Michelle, I'm going to pick on you because you are a working mother, but the stress stats around returning mums to work, I was just like, still, so high again. What do you think are the reasons for that? What do you think is kind of driving some of those things?
A lot of the similar reasons, that the structure of business still just isn't set up to be flexible and thoughtful and adaptable to different human beings at different stages of life. I just think we underestimate the hugeness of becoming a parent, whether you're a mother or a father.
Good point.
You know, for fathers, we have to look out for our fathers, become very vulnerable at that stage as well.
Because I think I spoke to somebody just yesterday who is
pregnant, and she came up to me and said, pregnant, I'm going off in 3-4 months, and I'm absolutely terrified about returning to work because I've heard it's so appalling. And I was just like, oh my word, like...
Well, it's like the data that came out a couple of weeks ago about the number of mothers denied their job back in this country. It's something like 80,000. Yeah.
Can I talk about the stress container?
Talk about the stress container. I love the stress container. And then we're going to go on to practical solutions.
Yeah, but I really want this to be useful for everyone in the room. Because not all stress is bad. I think we mustn't demonise stress. What we have to do is understand stress and manage stress. So in mental health first aid training, we talk about the stress container. So everyone has a stress container, or if it's easier, imagine it as a bucket. And our day-to-day stresses go into our bucket, and then that bucket is rising. And then if you can imagine a little valve on the side of that bucket, and that's your coping mechanisms for stress. We have good coping mechanisms. What would an example of a good coping mechanism be? Exercise. Brilliant. What we're going to do in a minute after we've stopped chatting? Meditation. Yeah. Talking about it. There are lots of good things. What are the things that you do that are good for you to cope with your stress? Then there's the unhelpful mechanisms that we sometimes fall to. What are unhelpful mechanisms to deal with stress?
Drinking.
Maybe drinking too much, or that becoming part of your coping mechanism.
Instagram till 1 a.m.
Yeah, spending too much time on social media if that is not nourishing for you. And what happens is, in our lives, if so much is going into our stress container, and the size of your stress container is unique to you, and that kind of represents your vulnerability. And that's, your vulnerability is what makes you. It's genes, it's all of your experiences through life. And for me in 2016, if I use my own stress container as the example, I would say I'm a pretty resilient person, actually. But in 2016, it was the list of things that were happening for me, physically, mentally, environmentally, in the business, out of business, as a parent, as a business leader. It's just, it was there was a trauma on a plane. It was a list that you kind of couldn't, you couldn't make it up. But also, it was just one of those years. We all can have bad years. And we all have a snapping point. Every single one of us has a snapping point. And at the end of 2016, I snapped. And so I think, if you think about that stress container, to come back to the question about women returning to work, that is suddenly an extra massive thing that is going into your stress container. So yeah, it's about, yes, it is about the structures and business needing to be more flexible, but it's just one extra thing about you that is massive. And so that's going into your stress container. And so what are the things, and often then you're starting to put yourself at the bottom of the priority list as opposed to the top of the priority list. So I think it's useful for us to understand that. Stress can be good. Stress can be motivating. There's nothing like a deadline. Stress is a natural response to danger in front of us. When stress becomes a problem is when our response to it is out of proportion to the danger in front of us, or if that stress sustains over a long period of time. And that's when we become vulnerable to developing poor mental health, and that's then when we become vulnerable to potentially developing mental illness that may come with a diagnosis. So it's about how we look after our stress containers, how we manage stress. So what are we doing in business, or just as human beings, to look after, understand our own stress container.
The perfect segue. What are we doing in business to help us understand what to do or our day-to-day lives? I'm going to start with Emma. What have you seen work? What have you not seen not work? What advice would you give to everybody here about what they can do to change things in their businesses?
I think, unfortunately for me, at the time when I was most unwell, there was a lot of conversation and good intent, but there weren't a lot of initiatives as much as there are now. So if I look to one of the companies that I used to work for, what I like to see is Mediacom I used to work for. I was one of the board of directors there. And the CEO, Josh, at the moment, has picked up mental health as something that he wants to champion and drive through. And what's really good about that is that Josh is making himself vulnerable. He's encouraging other people in the building to make themselves vulnerable. He's opened a conversation, and the message is consistent. There is support, there is initiatives, and from top to bottom, mental health is becoming something that is consistently being driven through the business. I think consistency is so important, particularly after a week like Mental Health Awareness Week, where it's great for a week, and then we go back and are we kind and are we considerate?
You've purposefully not done Mental Awareness Week for that reason.
Are we educating? And I have friends still within MediaCom, and I have people from MediaCom kind of reach out to me since I started surviving Sundays. I know that it is working. There's a lot of work to do. Josh was very surprised when he sent around a survey to understand the number of people who he works alongside that have had challenges, and he's taken that as a responsibility. So I think that's a really good example. There are other ways in
Can I
which...
just pause on that?
Yeah.
I think what's interesting there is that Josh is the boss man, so it came from the top.
Yeah.
It wasn't that it was put on. What I've seen a lot is that, you know, somebody very junior in the organisation might start talking about something and they're suddenly made responsible for everything.
Yeah,
you are now responsible for mental
yeah.
health. In this instance, it was the leader of the business
Yeah.
who kicked it off and put the resources and the time in.
And it's about the resources. It's not just about, you know, these panels are great. They you know, each time I tell a story, I will have conversations afterwards, and they're so useful. But he's putting initiatives in place. When I was in that same company, having the problems that I was having, I was at senior level. I felt like I would be kind of like outed and like not able to do my job. I think it's a very like different place now. I think it probably might have been okay then, but there's a culture that is becoming very open there. So that's great. I think an experience perhaps I've had of where things haven't been so great, or I could imagine having now. I met one of my former bosses from MediaCom for breakfast yesterday, which was really interesting actually, and he was so astounded, can you believe it, to hear that I don't drink anymore. So 5.5 months ago, I stopped drinking, and I've done that for my mental health. I am not clinically addicted, but I definitely fall into that space of what we call grey area drinking. And when you're in an industry like this, you're out at events, you are drinking a lot. It's what we do. I've got to take one of my clients out. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take them for drinks. We're going to drink a lot, and we're going to hang out and we're going to drink a lot. And for me, the anxiety, the fear, the depression that's brought with me for years, the suppression of things I needed to face, it was too much. However, I think now, like, to go out to Cannes and have the experiences that I had there, or to be at a table with clients or leaders and not drink, I'm not sure how far along we are with the inclusivity around that for the people that don't drink. I was one of the lucky people that got invited to the pub with the leadership team. If I hadn't drank, I don't know if there would have been the same seat at the table for me. And one of the things we don't perhaps look at as a problem that's connected to mental health should be, and that is our attitudes towards addiction and the road to addiction. It's not just that we're all on the street with a brown paper bag. You know, there are clear signs that we need to look to, and I think more inclusivity around that. You know, working late in the office, oh, here's a drinks trolley, there's drinks in the fridge, we're all going to drink, we're going to celebrate, we're going to commiserate with alcohol. For me, I'd be really interested to see now where that goes. There wasn't a lot of care, of duty towards... I've put really young executives in taxis before to take care of them, and I'm just really interested to see whether that, as we're talking about mental health, it's not all about the yoga and the matcha lattes and the meditation, which I do daily. It's about drinking culture, I believe, as well.
I think it's quite interesting, the responsibility we all have to look out for each other there. I think that is quite interesting.
Yeah.
And then what would be your advice as someone who's sort of outside the workplace? What would you like to see in the workplace for you to feel like you were being supported?
I see a lot of companies who pat themselves on the back because twice a year they let their staff go on a day and learn about mental health, or they get a panel in occasionally, or they have beer in the fridge on a Friday where you can leave early or wear less smart clothes. Your commitment to your staff's well-being can't be a half-assed attempt. It can't be something that you don't like. The well-being of your staff is the foundation of everything, and there's this the thing in tech of work fast and break things. You can't work fast and break your people. That's not going to work, and that's one of the things that I think really needs to understand. We talk in LGBT rights about whole school approaches when we're working at schools. I want to see a whole business approach to employee well-being, and not have it be a tokenistic thing, not to have not have it be something that isn't like prioritised from the top. And that's the other thing, is that, you know, I'm coming into a company, when I'm in panels like this, I'm in this position where I can have a voice and speak. I'm going to be going to the company at the lowest level. I have no influence, I will have no power, and I'll be fighting against like existing structures which are long-standing. And it needs change, don't get me wrong, but I'm not empowered in most places to be able to do that, I imagine. And so it needs to be something that comes from the top, or at least is supported by the top. And also having a lot of companies are resistant to that because it's work. It's another thing for them to be thinking about. And it's, you know, you're actually going to have to find resources and people and put in time and effort into this. And it becomes, it's one of the things I was saying on the panel the other day, is that it becomes an issue of prioritisation and how much you actually care about this often. And that's one of the really challenging things. But also, none of that happens. None of this, none of this change is going to happen if the people who need to be in the room aren't in the room. If you've got a room of able people making the decisions about accessibility
or about
disability.
Abortion rights in America.
Oh no, that was signed off by white women, so don't.
Oh really?
Yeah. If you've got a room of people who aren't disabled, who aren't neurodivergent in the room making decisions about your access policies and disability policies and flexible working policies, that's where you start. And if those people aren't senior enough to be able to make those decisions, maybe work out why your disabled work people, what do you call them? People? Yeah.
Staff.
Why your disabled staff aren't able to get up the career ladder. Maybe look there. Maybe look at the very structural issues.
I love your point around the consistency, the depthness of it. Move fast and break things, brackets, but not your people.
Yeah.
I think that's something. Very quickly, Charlotte, I just want to get a couple of questions before we go to our meditation, because I'm definitely ready for the meditation. What's worked in Omnicom?
Yeah, so we're on a journey like a lot of big organisations are at the moment. You know, these are people issues, and they're complicated. You know, everyone who struggles with mental health or are neurodiverse or has a disability, they're all very personal and they're all kind of very, very different. I think that the journey around mental health is a good one, but it's still at a very, very early stage. We're talking a lot more about mental health, so we're kind of ticking that awareness box. We've got mental health first aiders in place. We're trying to raise the kind of bar of how people understand mental health. But I think the big thing that is the elephant in the room that we've got to tackle that not a lot of people are talking about at the moment is the kind of disease that is presenteeism at work. So a lot of the problems, I think, around work-based stress and therefore the mental health issues that can come with that is that we're always putting others before ourselves. And if you put yourself first, and one of the biggest learnings that I had from my own personal experience is that you have to put yourself first before you can help others, means that you have got to have more flexibility in the workplace to be able to accommodate different people's needs. So whether that is part-time, whether that is shared jobs, whether that is flexible hours, whether that is remote working more effectively, there's loads and loads of different things that businesses need to put in place now that we've started the journey around normalising mental health conversation, but there's still a long way to go. I think it's that culture of presenteeism, especially in the UK, that has to be tackled.
One of the things I think sums it up for me, obviously I used to work in the agency world, and I just think if I'd seen someone having a nap at 3 in the afternoon, I'd have been like, outraged, what are they doing? And now I'm like, if you need a nap, you should take a nap. If you need to rest, if you need to go for a walk at 4 in the afternoon, because there's a big deadline at 5, but you need that walk, you should go for the bloody walk.
Yeah.
And when I work more and more with large corporates, not agency world, they're all doing that. They have nap rooms. They let people work wherever the bloody hell they want, whenever they want. And yet the creative sector, which is supposedly so cool and advanced, it feels like it's still in the 1990s and everyone's called a bloody gecko. Yeah. Be at your desk! Boom! I'm just answering 40 emails at 11 at night because I'm so cool.
Bums on desks does not equal work.
No. Yes.
If I can realise that, you all should too.
So we've got time probably for literally one very quick question, but I do want to get a question. Would anyone like to ask anything from the audience? Lady Shaw.
Don't be shy. Do be shy. Don't be shy.
We don't bite.
Don't bite. Go on. Nobody? Oh, good. That's it. 3 all at once. Let's start at the front with the lady here, and then we'll see if we've got time for either of you two.
We touched really briefly on loneliness as something that results in really bad mental health. Just wondered if you have any sort of ideas for A, identifying it, and B, kind of helping to develop ways to kind of not fix it obviously, but make it easier in the workplace to kind of...
Well, it's a shame you asked this now, because last week we did a whole workshop on hacking loneliness. I would love you to have been at that. What age group is the most lonely in the country?
Young
do you
people.
think?
Young people.
Yeah, it's 18 to 24. Exactly, it's young people. Because of all the change that's going on, and I think we associate loneliness with the old man walking down with his little wheelie buggy thing with a small loaf.
They've often got really well-built communities. They've often got, like, older people often have really
exactly.
And also, I think this is partially to do with, a lot of older people find their communities based around where they live, you know, often or like church or like school or like physical building structures. I do a lot of stuff online and in social media, and I spend my entire life on Twitter. The reason for that being that my community and my people with whom I don't feel lonely are spread out, and we end up moving around a lot because who has the money to buy a house? Like, we don't have these physical structures that enable us to build a village. You know, you can't build a village, you can't find your physical community because the rent market is such that isn't like.
So how do you stop loneliness? What are your techniques?
Stop trying to do it like it was 60 years ago.
Oh, give us an example.
Well, just I realised that the structure, like, stop trying to fit the structures that used to. Do you know what I mean? Like, there was ways of making friends and contacts and finding community that were kind of old-fashioned, whether that be just through, and often happen just naturally through physical presence. I think there was an element of having to go and find your community more. Often through social media. Social media gets demonized a lot, but it's where I found my community, and especially like being like a young queer person, that was definitely somewhere. I didn't have anyone back home who was like me, so being able to go to like the internet and find people who have now become role models and friends and, you know, all this kind of stuff, who I could go to and be like, what should I wear on my date? You know, I didn't have that for a long time, and those are little things.
Now what you can wear on your day.
Yeah. But that's really important. And also realizing that your support network doesn't have to look like something conventional.
I think the most important thing, so because Ellen's answered that perfectly, is the most important thing is connection. Mm-hmm. The opposite of loneliness is connection, and that connection can be physical. If you are in a stable living environment, it can be as much as just smiling to the park, or it can be virtual.
Yeah.
So when I was on maternity leave, I was in a new area. I went days without seeing anybody. I hated maternity leave. What saved me was I got very active on Twitter, and I found a load of sweary people, and we got to swear together, and then we started to meet up.
Did you join the mum Facebook groups?
No, I did not, because the mum Facebook groups were, I'm having problems breastfeeding, what should I do? And I was like, I am too, and I don't want to talk about this anymore.
Mum Facebook groups know everyone. That's, if you ever if you ever have a problem in your local area, you find them on Facebook groups and they'll get it sorted with you within an hour. I seriously do that. It really works.
That's why we should use them. Right, very quickly, one last question.
Nats, can I add something
Yeah.
to the loneliness that hopefully comes full circle?
We'll go straight to
Because I'm not sure that we can stop loneliness.
No, it's a human feeling.
Yeah, and in the same, we can't stop poor mental health or mental illness necessarily. But so I would say the same answer for both. It's, you know, the more we talk about it, the more we acknowledge it, the more we say it out loud, that's then when you start to create connection, or, you know, just feel like you're less alone. You're not alone. That's your big message, Emma.
Every day.
With Surviving Sundays. So I would say, you know, where are the role models? Where are the people who are talking about it, acknowledging it? Because that's going to be the first step, whether it's loneliness or poor mental health.
And I think,
can I just say one last thing?
yeah, go on then we've got
I'm all about loneliness, and I think the thing is, it's not about necessarily always connecting with people. For me, it's about being seen with whatever I'm kind of going through internally, and often that's been through a conversation with my therapist or somebody that can help me work out why I'm feeling lonely. It's been really important. A group of friends couldn't have helped me with that on that given day. So I think sometimes it's about looking inward, working out what you need to be.
And the feeling of
How you
loneliness
need to be helped.
is a normal emotion to let you know that you need to do something.
Yes.
It's almost like the way Joe put it was like when you burn your finger, it's to let you know that something's hot. When you feel lonely, it's to let you know that you need to do something, whether
Maybe it's a
that is.
conversation about something. Or
Right, I'm going to go now to the bit I'm most excited about. No, sorry, that's not fair. I was really excited about this panel, but I'm really excited about. I've never met you here before, and I've never done any meditation.
This is new.
She's so good. I can vouch for these guys.
So where would you like us to get out of the way, and you're going to come up here? How would you like us to happen? Okay, so we'll move towards the back and get out of the way a bit. Well, sorry, this will take 15 minutes and you'll still finish on time, so don't worry, we're not going to be here for an hour. Are we, you?